Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Supercoach YouTube. You're on with Pig Mentality again, and I'm back to give you my recommendations for the captain armband this week. The round 2 is over. It was a bit of a strange week. There was some huge ceiling scores from premiums. There was also some really shocking underperforming premium scores. So I hope out of that you're able to kind of pick a good VC or C. That would have really helped boost your score last week. For the first 2 weeks of the season, I was kind of saying, let's have 2 cracks at a safe 120, take anything over 115. This week, I think I'm going to change my recommendation because, projecting ahead, I think there are some incredible matchups that are waiting for us to exploit this week. So generally, how I like to use my VC and C is simple. I VC who I think will be my highest scorer on my team for that week. And that's because I don't really want to get stuck with kind of a 125 VC and you're kind of umming and ahhing about whether I take it. And you might potentially miss out on who you actually think is going to be your highest scorer. The caveat to this is that you need a really safe, super reliable captain to fall back on if they fail. And you need a loophole playing after them. With these bye rounds, the loophole is pretty easy. Like a lot of us will have a loophole, especially probably in our forward line. So for this week, you just need to make sure that you have a safe fallback 120-ish captain playing after your super high ceiling VC. So don't just VC someone on the Sunday because they think you think they're going to be your highest scorer if you don't have a backup that you're really comfortable in. And I'll explain a bit more about what I mean as I go through. So in last week's video, I said I was going to plan to either VC Heaney if I was feeling adventurous or VC Dacos if I was feeling safe. Either way, Tom Green captain. I ended up going with the safe option, VC Dacos, kind of went with the pack. That backfired, but it was all right because I was able to fall back on my Tom Green captaincy, which did the job. So if you've been enjoying these videos, feel free to jump on Twitter, follow me at pig_DRSC. Any more Supercoach chat in general or vice captain and captain advice, I'm happy to chat there. So now we'll get onto it. So I'm still going to give you 3 vice captains and 5 captain recommendations, but in this week where we have late players, buy players as a really late loop, you don't necessarily have to VC someone on the early games. Like, as I read these 8 names out, you probably just need to identify who you think your best scorer will be and VC them as long as you've got a safe captain after them. So, number 3 for vice captain, Harry Sheezel. So Harry's only played against Carlton once in his young career and he scored a 111. That was actually only his 4th game of AFL football, so he got off to a hot start. In addition to this, he averaged 107 at Marvel Stadium. That's one of his higher averaging grounds for him. There's not really a lot of data to use for Sheezel yet, so this recommendation comes purely based off matchup. Carlton have given up the 2nd most points to opposition designated kicker defenders over the last 10 games, and you can use DFS Australia to look at these different matchup difficulties and what designates what a designated kicker is, things like that. Sheezel is certainly North Melbourne's main designated kicker coming out of defence this year. Scores of 130 and 113 to start the season show that Harry is ready to take it to another level. And we've already seen Harris Andrews score 118 and Nick Vlosten score 134 against Carlton already in 2024 as those kind of designated kickers. So this is a really nice matchup to target for Sheezel. Number 2 is Luke Ryan. So if you want to start your weekend off with a ceiling vice-captain score, Luke Ryan could be your guy. Scores of 165 and 127 to start the season. They're kind of not out of the ordinary for Luke. He does have patches like this every year. He has a career average of 113 from 6 games against the Crows. It's actually his 2nd favourite Supercoach matchup, so he loves playing them. He also returns home to Optus Stadium, where he had 2 of his 3 biggest scores in 2023. So he had a 143 and a 168 at Optus Stadium. Thing here is Adelaide aren't necessarily a great matchup for opposition defenders, but when you're spending the VC on someone, you kind of look for the huge upside, and Luke Ryan at Optus Stadium gives you exactly that. Number 1 for vice captains, we'll go Jordan Dawson. Jordan has been underwhelming from a Supercoach point of view to start the season, and his team is yet to win a game. He's been fine in terms of disposals and tackles, but he's been very inefficient in his ball use, and that's killed his Supercoach scoring. That's actually very unlike him, and we should expect that to revert to the normal at some stage, and it could be as soon as this weekend. Because Dawson averages 124 against Freo across his 5 career games. That's easily his highest scoring opponent. He also averages 109 at Optus Stadium from 5 games. With his team yet to win a game this season, after actually many tipped them to make the top 8, I feel like this could be the perfect opportunity for Dawson to fix his own issues and lead his team to a win against an opponent that he normally loves dominating. So he had 145 against them the last time he played at Optus. That was 2021. And he had 173 on them last year at Adelaide Oval. So there are probably 3 players in the early games if you do want to spend your VC early. We'll now go to a point of difference vice captain, and I am recommending vice captain here for this guy, not captain. Coming off scores of 109 and 144 against 2 very restrictive matchups, Jeremy McGovern is going to be my point of difference vice captain for you this week. So after those scores started with a 109 and a 144, he really needs to be discussed. Jeremy, he won't have been a popular starting pick, but I have seen a lot of coaches discussing trading him in. And if you do, why not chuck the VC on him for a bit of point of difference? McGovern plays the Bulldogs this week, who are the easiest matchup for opposition defenders in the league, especially those defenders who are designated kickers on their team. And without Hearn this year, Jeremy has been one of the main distributors from the Eagles' backline, and he's really reaped the rewards. So he's averaging 127 on the season. After playing against, he did that in 2 hard matchups. So there's no reason to think this won't be another huge score against the easiest matchup in the league. So if you bring in Jeremy McGovern, why not chuck the VC on him and just go for a point of difference? So then I'll go to my top 5 captains. And as I said, these guys might play early enough that you actually could VC them, and that's probably where I'd recommend going, as long as you've got a safe fallback captain option after them that you're confident in. So number 5, Isaac Heaney. Last week I had Heaney in the point of difference captain bracket, and that was because I didn't think really many serious super coaches would have been brave enough to captain him. And I think that changes this week. So starting the year with scores of 144, 133, and 128, Heaney's now a very popular selection. And I think he's one that we will begin to be trusted with the captain armband, and especially this week against Richmond. So the Tigers are an easy matchup for midfielders in 2023, and this year they've already given up scores of 137 to Matt Rao, 124 Sam Flanders, 122 Noah Anderson, 135 Patrick Cripps, 175 Zac Butters, and 144 to Willem Drew. So an inside contested beast like Heaney should have no problem scoring on these guys, and I think he's a perfect fallback captain on a Sunday, which hopefully that should allow you to vice captain who you think will be your biggest scorer of the round. Number 4, Zac Butters. So Zac's been in my captain recommendation videos every week this season, albeit there's only been 2 rounds for him. But after 117 in round 1 from only 61% CBAs, he tore Richmond apart last week with a 175 from 79 CBAs. So that was an example of what we know Butters can do. This week he plays against Melbourne, who they're kind of like a middle-of-the-pack matchup for inside midfielders. They're not necessarily an easy matchup, but Zac did score 184 points on them, which is his career high in this exact matchup in 2023, so Melbourne at Adelaide Oval. The only reason that Butters isn't higher on this list is because Melbourne have only given up 2 120-point scores to midfielders so far this season, and because the 3 names that I'll discuss next have incredibly kind matchups. But a guy in this kind of form can't be discounted, and I think we could see another large Butters score here. Number 3, we go to Max Gawn. So Max has scores of 162 against an easy matchup and 113 against a hard matchup to start the season. Well, here he comes into this game with another easy matchup. So the Port Adelaide ruck duo of Ivan Soldo and Jeremy Finlayson, they win the hit out in 37% of their ruck contests That's actually one of the lowest percentages in the league. Gawn tends to have his spike scores when he's dominating the hitouts to advantage or just grabbing it out of the ruck himself and getting the clearance. And I expect him to be able to do both of those things at will this weekend against two undersized ruckmen. Max also has a huge 124 career average at Adelaide Oval. That's actually his third favourite venue for Supercoach scoring, in grounds that he's played at least 5 games at, so he loves playing at Adelaide. I wouldn't read too much into his last 2 matchups with Port Adelaide, as he was ruck sharing with either Brodie Grundy or Luke Jackson in those. And this 2024 solo ruck, Max Gawn, is a totally different animal. We then go to number 2 is Marcus Bontempelli. The West Coast were the easiest matchup in the league for most Supercoach players last year. Marcus Bontempelli was the highest Supercoach scorer in the league last year. I could just give you those 2 ingredients and that's kind of all you need to make a delicious captain pie. But I'm going to add some toppings to make it even better. 162 and 145 were the Bont scores in his last 2 matchups against West Coast at Marvel Stadium. A 116 career average from 12 games against the Eagles is one of his highest teams to play against. This is the Bulldogs' first game at their home ground last year, a venue where Bont averaged 128 in 2023, and he actually only dropped below 110 once at Marvel last year. So, if you own Bont, this is the perfect matchup. And if you own him, I would recommend using the VC on him, not the C, if you can. The reason is I don't want you getting a 125 VC from, say, like a Dawson or a Sheasel earlier in the week, and then missing this opportunity to get what I think could be a giant Bont score. But you do need to be very confident in a captain that can go 120 in the either of the following 2 games. So VC and have your loophole ready, or if you don't have someone you trust in those last 2 games, you might just have to captain Bont and go for a high VC upside. Number 1 is Tim English. Tim has started the year as we all expected, a 119 against a hard opponent in Max Gawn, during which Tim was also carrying a knock he sustained in that match. Then he put a 138 against the Jared Whittless Suns last weekend. This week he gets the West Coast Eagles, who they just bleed points to opposition ruckmen. So Ivan Soldo scored 125 on them in round 1, and then he only backed that up with a 44 against a harder opponent last week. Whereas Kieran Briggs scored a 57 in round 1 against a hard opponent, but then he bounced back with a 139 against the Eagles in round 2. So that kind of highlights the huge swings in some player scores when playing the Eagles. They're just a goldmine for opposition ruckmen. The main reason that they are a goldmine is that the ruck duo of Bailey Williams and Callan Jamieson combined to win the hit-out in only 33% of their ruck contests. That is the lowest in the league. So that leaves a lot of hit-outs available to their opponents. And I know West Coast brought in Harry Barnett last week, but he was subbed out after winning 8 hit-outs from 35 ruck contests, so he was only going at 23% win rate. And once he was subbed out, Bailey Williams took over the reins and actually attended more ruck contests than him anyway. So my theory with Team English is that he's always going to get his disposals and marks around the ground with his running power, whatever that might be. He might kind of average his 18 disposals and 4 marks. I haven't actually looked at what it is, but he'll always be around that mark. But when he has his giant spike scores, I've noticed, is when he plays against a lesser ruckman, and he can add a lot of hit-outs to advantage to that score. And we know Supercoach rewards hit-outs to advantage very, very favourably. And this is the number 1 matchup for that exact scenario. So I think lock and load. If you want a bit more data, 118 and 160 were the last 2 scores from Tim English when he played the Eagles. So much like Bont, if you have someone you trust to captain in those last 2 games on Sunday, Arvo, or Monday, I would recommend VCing English so you can have a crack at his score. But if you don't have anyone in those last games, VC a high upside guy, maybe like Max Gawn, and then roll the C into English could be an option as well. So what I'm going to do, I have full faith in Isaac Heaney as a fallback 120 captain option on the Sunday Arvo, which gives me the opportunity to VC Tim English and hopefully get onto his, what I think could be a massive score. I think Errol Goulden, I haven't mentioned him, but he potentially could be an okay fullback option. He should be safe enough against the Tigers as well. There isn't really anyone else in those teams, say Sydney, Richmond, Geelong or Hawthorn, that I'd really be comfortable falling back on, apart from Heaney and Goulden. Maybe Chad Warner if you had him, but I don't think many people do. I wouldn't fall back on Grundy. I wouldn't fall back on Nank, Taranto. So if you don't have Heaney or Goulden, you probably have to go an earlier VC and then lock your C into one of these high guys. And that's fine. You might get an awesome score there. Like I said, I play more aggressive with the captains, where I want my VC to be on the highest score of my team because I want the opportunity to take that. And I don't want to kind of get stuck with a 120 and be kind of safe and take that. I know there are some people who like to play the captain's game as you have 2 cracks at a safe 120. And I think that's totally fine as well. If that's how you want to play, if you want to have 2 cracks at, you hope your vice captain gets 120. If he doesn't, then hope your captain gets 120. That is a safe way to do it. And safety, especially early in this season, is not a bad idea. I just think there's some really, really juicy matchups this year that kind of are just begging for a VC score because they could be huge. As I mentioned before, that's all from me. So if you want to follow me on Twitter at pig_DRSC. Also, feel free to jump into the comments down here in YouTube and chat about anyone you think I've missed. Like I've only got 9 slots to recommend players, so there's going to be players I haven't talked about. Let me know who you're VCing or seeing. And best of luck this weekend, and I hope you have a good round, and I hope your captain absolutely dominates. Cheers.